know, I've been the judge advisor for the Springdale qualifier for the last 2 years. I've been judging with First Lego League as long as we've been doing the Razorback Invitational on campus, and I love Lego League. Lego League just makes me happy. And I did put my email address up here if you guys have questions about project during the semester while you guys are working, while your teams are working on their stuff. Please feel free to email me. I'm happy to answer questions. Okay, so I'm going to reiterate a couple of the things that Richard talked about. So the project for this year is to identify a physical or social problem faced by humans during long-duration space exploration within our sun's solar system. And I highlighted 2 things there because one of the problems that we sometimes see as project judges is that people will have a really great idea or a really great project, but they don't frame it right. So you have to make sure that you frame it within those important characteristics, because you can have a really great idea, but if you don't show how it fits within the project problem, then it doesn't matter that it's a great idea. So the process is you have to design a way to solve your problem, and then of course share your problem and your solution with others. And I'm going to use an example as I go through some of these slides today. I did a little bit of reading this week about hydroponics in space and some of the challenges that scientists are facing. So we're designing a hydroponic system that helps plants grow in a way that allows their nutrients to be absorbed by the roots, because otherwise the plants die. And we want plants in space. So the rubric information, as Richard mentioned, the rubric's going to be a little simpler this year. So those of you that are familiar with the rubric, it's still divided into the 3 same areas, and it's got the 3 same sub-areas within those. But instead of a 5-point scale, it's a 3-point scale, so it's a little easier. And rather than having comments after each section where we try to mush together the good things that you did and the bad, or not bad things, things that need improvement, because there's no bad things. We have instead one big section down at the bottom where we have, here are the things you did really well and here are the things that you can improve on. So hopefully that'll help the kids see that in a different way.
When will those be?
I have a draft. I'm not entirely sure. But as far as what they're judging, it's the same as last year. So if you have a copy of the rubric last year, what they're looking for within those categories is the same. It's just a more compact scale than it has been in the past. So the 3 rubric areas, of course, are research, innovation, innovative solution, and presentation. And then there's the 3 subcategories within each of those. And like I said, it's the same, what are we looking for in each of those that's been there in the past. We're just quantifying it in a slightly different way. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through each of these areas, and I'm going to tell you about some of the things that we have seen and some of the things that, and how we think about it as we do project judging. So thinking about how to be exceptional in research. So for problem identification, it's really important to identify the problem at the beginning of the presentation. It's really difficult for the judges if we get 3 minutes through a 5-minute presentation and we still don't really understand what problem it is that you're trying to solve. We've got to have that context enabled in order to be able to put everything else in its correct place. So, and I know sometimes it's a little difficult to really state that in a skit depending on what skit you're doing, but it's really important to get that in there. Even if it's a matter of you stand up and one of the kids stands up at the very beginning of the skit and says, our problem is X, and then go start the skit. That would be fine because that gives us that context we need to put the rest of it in place. And it's also really important to define the whole problem, not just the what, but the why. So in the hydroponics example I mentioned, it's really great to say, we want to talk about hydroponics in space. Okay, what about hydroponics? Well, one of the articles that I read talks about how roots don't grow the same in space because gravity on Earth makes roots grow down. There's no gravity in space, so the roots just kind of go everywhere. And so it's very difficult for people who are trying to do hydroponics in space to get nutrients to the roots because they don't go where they should go. So that's a problem that you could define at the beginning. And so how do we solve the problem of roots going everywhere? Then you have to explain why that's important. You can't just say roots go everywhere. Roots go everywhere, which means it's hard for us to get nutrients to the plant. That's the why. So we want to see that. And if you want to come up with a catchphrase or a nifty name, if the kids come up with a nifty name for whatever it is that they design, they come up with hydroplant. That's cool, but we still have to understand what it is that they're trying to solve and how they're solving it. Sources of information. This can be really awesome. We love seeing kids who do a depth of research. It's very nifty to have the kids walk in with a project binder that has 17 pages worth of links and article citations and all that sort of thing. But it's also really important for them to have a good breadth of information as well. If they go out and Google 45 websites, well, that's cool. Are they all just websites with popular science articles about hydroponics? That's not showing us that they have done, real good diligence. We want to see journal articles. We want to see, if they find a video that's been put together by NASA that talks about how hydroponics work in space, or they actually have just been able to eat lettuce in space for the first time that they grew on the International Space Station. So find something about that on the website to share. Talking to your experts is absolutely critical. So we want to see a variety, and it's much more important for us to see that variety because we know that they're looking in different places and thinking about things in different ways. One of the things that Richard mentioned about robot design is that it's really important for the robot design judges to see the process. The same is true for project judges. It's not even mostly about the solution that they come up with. It's the critical thinking process and the iterations that they go through to get to their final product that we want to see. And this is one way that we see that. And I know it's a little tough because a lot of the information is found online. I know every time I go search something in the library for one of my classes, it's online. I don't go to the library and pick out a book. I go online to the library's website and I find the article I need or the source that I need there. But a journal article online is still a journal article, right? So you just have to describe it. And so quality over quantity. And the other thing I would mention is I have had a lot of teams who will stand up and they will literally list off every source that they've gotten. And if you have 45 sources, you've now spent 30 to 45 seconds of your presentation doing nothing but reading a list that you could just hand me and let me look at. So it's not a very good use of their time that they could be using to answer questions or give us some actual information from the sources. And even for professionals, variety is good. I know a lot of you are going to be looking for space experts to work with, and that's important. But in the case of the hydroponics example, if you can find somebody that you can talk to who does hydroponics here on Earth, I know the university runs a tank farm up on campus, and there's some other farmers around here that do hydroponics on a regular basis. Talk to them too, because they're experts in their field too. If you were doing something that had to do with air filtration, maybe you want to talk to an HVAC person, somebody who works with heating and air conditioning all the time. They're experts in their field too. So take advantage of that and get different perspectives on the situation. Okay. And problem analysis, this goes back to what we're really looking for. The two things that are measured in the problem analysis section are study and analysis. So study is learning, right? That's finding your information, understanding the problem, understanding the parameters of the problem, but it's just taking in information. Analysis is really important because that's how we synthesize that information together to come up with the ideas to solve the problem. So we have a lot, all of our teams generally do a very good job at the study part. They're very good at finding experts, they're very good at finding sources, learning information, and they could spend the whole 5 minutes talking about the problem. What we don't see a lot of, or what we see less of, is people who can actually synthesize that data and explain how they got to their solution. And that's what we want to see, is that whole process. Whatever their solution is did not magically appear on a table or on a spreadsheet or whatever it is that they came up with. They had to think about things. They had to consider issues and figure out what was the most important part of it, what was the thing that had to be solved first. And if we don't see that, then we don't understand their process. So it's that analysis which leads to the new solutions that we want to be able to see. And don't be shy about sharing existing solutions. You know, a lot of the times we'll ask kids, what other solutions are out there? Well, we know there's other solutions that are out there. People are working on these problems all the time. And when kids tell us, well, we couldn't find anything, or there's not a solution out there, that's, we know that's not true. And it may be that they didn't find it. That may be the honest answer. But even if it's a partial solution, if it's something that they found that helped them get to their final solution, if they found a hydroponics idea that's being used now and they think, well, that's cool, but if it did this, it would be even better. Right now they're using little pillows of dirt in space to help grow plants, to help them keep the roots where they need to be. That's really cool, but maybe there's a way we can make that better. Understanding what they found that already exists out there is good for us too. Does anybody have questions about project at the moment, or about the research part of this? Cool. So innovative solution is the second section. And the first part of that is the team solution. So this is just basically, did they give us a solution that makes sense? Not, is it a solution that could be implemented? Did they explain it in a way that's logical and that we can see what the point of their solution is? And how does it solve the problem? So if they come up with the next generation of soil pillows for hydroponics, how does that improve on what's out there? How does that solve the problem that they're trying to address? And really don't make the mistake of under-explaining. So these kids are basically doing the same thing that university researchers do when they submit proposals to a federal agency. The first person that sees every one of those proposals is not a subject matter expert. They're people like me who work in the field of research, who have a general understanding of science and how the scientific process works. Some of them do have engineering experience, but not all of us do. I'm a biologist by degree, but I'm a research manager by trade. I'm an accountant, basically. So these are the kind of people that university researchers propose to. And they have to be able to explain their work in a way that makes sense, addresses the problem, and gives the full picture of the solution. And so a lot of times we'll see kids try to simplify something down because they know that we're not hydroponics engineers. Well, that's cool, but I'm a smart person and I understand about root systems, so I'm trying to make sure I'm staying on time. So don't under-explain it. We need to see the whole process, and that's what's really important for us. Innovation, of course, is where your team can really shine. And like Richard said, having a solution that could actually be implemented by the team, that's nifty. And that's how, there are some real benefits to having something that you can actually put together a real prototype of. But if their idea for how to have plants grow in space is to genetically engineer those plants so that they grow twice as many roots so that it's easier to get roots into the plant, that's cool. That's really cool. We just have to be able to, again, see that logical process and understand how they got there. And you can compare and contrast with the existing solutions. How is yours better than what's out there right now? How is it different? How is it taking the state of the art of hydroponics in space to the next level? And again, be sure to frame your solution in terms of the project and the task that you're trying to address. There we go. This one is really important, okay, because this is the solution. This solution development is the whole point of project, frankly. We need to understand the design process for your solution. If you did a prototype, bring it. If you did a paper mock-up, if you built a root system out of confetti and things, that's very cool. Bring it, show it to us. What was the process that the kids used to get from A to B? And having those visuals and really understanding that process is key for us to be able to make decisions. That's what's going to differentiate between a good team that maybe might go on to state and a team that is absolutely in our top 8. And same thing for invitational. The teams that do the best in invitational are the ones that can communicate to us their whole process and their whole thought, their whole thinking behind their solution. And tell us what didn't work. That's one of the questions that I ask a lot of teams is, They'll bring out a prototype and they'll be like, look at this pretty thing that we built and we did it on the 3D printer and it's really awesome. Is that your first prototype? Well, no, we had 3 other prototypes before this. Well, where are your other 3 prototypes? Show us the whole process. The final product is one thing. How did you solve the problem? We had a team last year in Invitational that did really good. They had brought us their 3D printed their caps for water faucets, and you put them on there, and it's essentially it basically focuses the water and it minimizes the amount of water coming out of the faucet without reducing the pressure. Well, they went through like 3 or 4 different design stages, because the first one they put it on the faucet and the water pressure immediately popped it right back off again. Well, so then they had to kind of think about threading and all those kinds of things to get to their final solution, and they told us about that, and that was really cool, because that was how we saw that they actually had to go back to the drawing board and start again, and the product that they have is a better product for it. And then sharing. So, presentation. So presentation is the final piece, and a lot of teams will spend a whole lot of time on coming up with a really super presentation, which we appreciate because it's super fun to watch. But it's important to remember that the whole point of the presentation is to get across the work that they've done. So you can have a really great skit, but if you spend 5 minutes doing a really great skit that doesn't give us the information that we need, you're not going to get scored as highly as somebody who just did a PowerPoint presentation and was really clear about the work that they did. Presentation is a tool. It's not the point. Sharing, however, is the point. And this is the piece that has to happen before they even get to tournament. Okay? Sharing is, who did they communicate their idea to? So if they talk to 3 different experts about hydroponics, if they talk to the space expert and a botanist and somebody who runs a hydroponics farm, did they take their product back to all 3 of those people and ask them for their opinion? Did they get feedback from them to try to make their product better? That's what we want to hear about, because that's that iterative process that's so important. And some of those folks can give you some really great ideas and some really great feedback that's just going to make your idea better. It's also important for the kids to get to practice their presentation. So if they want to use their family groups or their school and stuff to do that, that's good, because that gives them the opportunity. And if we're lucky enough to be able to do the dress rehearsal tournament, which I think would be incredible, that's another one of those opportunities for them to put their ideas out there, see how the presentation works, make sure they're getting the timing right, that kind of thing. But sharing is a two-way conversation. There's got to be feedback, and there's got to be, you get feedback, you adjust. You get feedback, you adjust. So that's what that's about, is making sure that the kids are doing that, making sure that they're getting their ideas out there. It helps them be more comfortable. If the first time they ever stand up in front of a group and present their work is when they show up to the regionals and have to do it in front of judges, it can be really terrifying. We had a girl a couple years ago who just forgot her lines completely. She was trying so hard, and her team was standing there going, "Your lines are this, come on, say the word." And she couldn't get it, and she just started to cry. She went and sat in the corner. She did not know what to do with herself because she couldn't do it. And it hurt to watch, right? Because you want them to be successful. We want them to be successful. So give them the opportunity to do that before they have to come do it for us. Creativity in the creativity measures 2 things. We're looking at how engaging your presentation is and how imaginative it is. So it's nifty to have a skit. I won't lie, I'm a little tired of the Shark Tank things. Every year we have a dozen Shark Tank presentations. And there's a reason that we have Shark Tank presentations, because it's a really good platform for getting the information across, right? It's very easy for people to say, here's our problem, here's our solution, here's why our solution is neat, okay? But there's a dozen of them every It's not imaginative anymore. But we had one last year for the water thing where they didn't do Shark Tank, they did, I want to say it was like Turtle Tank. And so it wasn't Shark Tank. It was kind of Shark Tank, but really not. And they took it in a direction that was really different, and they made it much more socially conscious. And what the turtles were looking for was like something that was going to help the most animals, not something that was going to make them the most money. So it was really, it was different. So it was kind of nice. So you can take an idea that's out there and make it your own, and it'll be really good. And engaging, frankly, engaging is important. It's a 5-minute presentation. It's hard to put people to sleep in 5 minutes. I've seen it happen. So, it's hard to do because a lot of these are young kids who maybe have never done group presentations before, and so they want to memorize their lines and stand up in the front of the room and say their lines, and they're going to do the thing, and that's all they're going to do, and they can't do anything else. And they're never going to make eye contact with the judges. They're never going to use their bodies to communicate how excited they are about their work. And that's tough for kids. They have to learn how to do that. That's not a talent, that's a skill. Okay, I'm still not good at it, and I've been doing it for years.
To the judging, how important is it to them that for the students to have it memorized,
There's a part of it that's important because memorization is what gives them the ability to communicate potentially difficult concepts. So if they have to memorize a line in the play to talk about, why the roots, what biological reason is there that the roots grow on all different ways in space, that's okay. But what we really want to hear about is the process. It's more important for the kids to be comfortable enough to communicate. And I'm actually going to talk about that more here in just a second, because that's a really good question. And I will tell you, don't overthink the presentation part of the world. Okay, there are kids who come up with absolutely out of this world ideas, and they spend 2 months building props and coming up with costumes and writing scripts and doing some really incredible stuff. But again, if that doesn't communicate their work and we can't see what it is that they were trying to accomplish, none of that matters, because they're not going to move on if we can't understand the problem they were trying to solve and the solution that they came up with. We would much rather see a really good PowerPoint presentation where the kids just stand there, or we've had some really good storyboard presentation where the kids all basically stand there and the person who's talking holds up their storyboard that has the piece of information they're trying to get across, and they talk about the storyboard. Some of the best presentations I've ever seen have been that way. It doesn't require all the bells and whistles. It requires that they have a good idea and they communicate it well. And then presentation effectiveness. This is really critical because this is what ties all of your project together. Okay, again, it doesn't matter if you have all the bells and whistles if you're not effectively communicating. Because we can't judge something if the information is not given to us. So I'm telling you guys the same thing that I tell the folks that I help with proposals on campus. This is all about telling a story, okay? You have a beginning where you come up with your problem and you do your research and identify your issue. There's a middle where you come up with your solution and you start working on it. And then there's the end where now you're presenting it to the judges. You've done all this work, you've pulled it all together, you've successfully created something that is really cool. I don't care what it is, I guarantee you it's really cool. And we want to see it. And so tying all of it together and sharing all of it with us is a really important thing to be doing. And again, please God, don't just read off placards or PowerPoint slides. Again, I know some kids have a real hard time presenting, and they have to do it by memorizing rote lines, otherwise they can't do it. My sister was that way. She really wanted to be really good at being on stage in front of people, but as soon as she got up there and looked down at all of the little people staring at her from down in the auditorium, she was just like, She couldn't do it unless she knew all she was doing was mechanically reciting something. It's really hard for a lot of kids, especially kids who do have some of the issues that we see. Making them stand up in front of a group or even just 2 or 3 judges and have to recite something. It's more terrifying for them than anything that they've ever experienced in their lives. And some kids just can't do it. Well, don't make them. They don't have to. Not every kid has to stand up and talk. If you do something with storyboards, maybe you've got the kid who holds the storyboard. And if that's comfortable for them and that's the best way that they can be a part of the team and be happy about being part of the team, rock the heck on. That's wonderful. Or if there's somebody, if they're doing hydroponics and somebody's the plant with the roots growing everywhere, cool. They don't have to talk, but they're still a critical part of the presentation. They can still be important, they can still be involved, but they don't have to do something that they're not capable or not good at doing. And we love that too, by the way.
So that won't be counted off on them if they are so shy and introverted, like they don't answer questions, they're terrified.
No, and the Q&A section is I want to talk about that here in a section, because that's something we see a lot in the Q&A section, because it is something that Lego League does talk about. I'm going to skip ahead. So the Q&A section is really just as important to us as the presentation section, right? Because that's the point where we can, if there's something that the kids talked about that maybe they skimmed a little bit in a presentation because it's hard to present some things in a skit or whatever it is that they decided to do, the Q&A is super important to us. So kids who maybe don't do as much during the presentation, maybe they'll be a little bit more forward during the Q&A. If you have somebody who's extra super shy, let me tell you, we can tell. Because there are kids who are literally right here, and they want to tell us everything about their project, and they want to do it right now. And there are some kids who, if they're using a table during their presentation, they will not come out from behind the table, and they're standing there. And you can just tell from looking at them that they want to have nothing to do with being up in front of other people. We get that. We're not going to try to force them to become an extrovert in a room. I am an introvert. I have exactly a certain number of spoons that I can deal with people during the day. And I fake it really well because that's what my job requires me to do. Nobody at my work has any idea that I'm an introvert. They don't know because I don't tell them, because I have to be an extrovert at work. My kids and my husband are all perfectly aware of the fact that I'm an introvert because I go home and I don't want to have to deal with anything. Because I've already used my spoons for the day. So, but I'm 40 now. Actually, I'll be 40 next month. It's taken me a lot of years to figure out how to be able to go in front of people and talk to them and not be terrified of it. And these kids have just barely begun that process. So we get that, and we will look for that, and we will try not to push on the kids. And you're also going to have the kids in your group that are going to be the talkers, right? Sometimes it's really, really hard to suppress that one kid they're in charge, they're going to say everything, it's their way or the highway, it's all their show. Well, there are ways around that, right? Because you want to be able to take advantage of that and encourage them to be able to get out and talk to people. So make them the spokesperson. We're going to ask them questions, and instead of them being the one to answer the question every time, give them the job of farming the questions out. I can't tell you, sometimes we have teams that are so busy trying to respect each other's space that they will spend 20 seconds going, are you answering? Who's answering the question? Well, they're losing time by doing that. Well, if you got a spokesperson, they can say, well, Katie, you're the expert. You're the one who found us the hydroponics expert, so why don't you answer that question? Eddie, you're the one who helped us to build the prototype for the first thing. Why don't you answer that question? Use their strengths. Let them shine. And then that's a way that they can also support their teammates, because they're going to know better than we do who are the people that are going to be most comfortable talking about something. Your super introverted kid may not be comfortable talking about anything except how they put together the props for the play. Well, that's okay. Your spokesperson kid is going to know that, and they can help us find that person so that they can have their chance to talk and have their chance to speak about something that's not going to be super terrifying for them. And what's really important, the last thing on this is actually really important, because we have a lot of teams that they do their skit, and that's their memorized part. And then we get to the Q&A, and we try to draw more out of them because we want to understand the process better. And all they can do is re-recite things from the skit. Right? We get exactly the same answer that we heard during the skit. Well, that doesn't give us what we need to know. So they need to be able to understand their subject matter well enough to be able to do more than just recite lines. You know, that's what's important. So if you have some people that are better at the skit and they can do the recited lines, and some people who can actually dig deeper into that and be able to explain things more in depth, that's great. That's a good way to break things up. But they're in Q&A. And if we come and do pit visits, that's also true for pit visits. I cannot tell you how frustrating it is to go do pit visits and hear the skit again. We didn't come to the pit to hear the skit again. We came to the pit to find out more information. Or I'm trying to, if I'm the one who saw you in the morning and we're doing callbacks in the afternoon, and I'm trying to get another judge familiar enough with your work that they can be able to judge you, even though they're not going to have a chance to see your whole skit. We need to be able to communicate what's your problem, what's your solution, how did you get there, without having to go through the skit again. So the kids need to be able to talk about this stuff outside of their memorized lines. They do need to be able to do that. Because you guys will all have access to the project sample question that you can download from the website. We do use these. My first question, pretty much every time, is the first question on here. How did you decide about your problem? Because I almost never hear that. People will tell me what their problem is, but they don't tell me how they got there. Did they do brainstorming sessions? Did they listen to an expert and say, ching, that's our idea? I don't ever hear that. So that's almost always my first question. But that's also almost the first question I ever read off of this, because my questions come from what I heard. So I'm going to ask them questions to try to dig more deeply into what they learned, to try to find out whether they actually learned something, or whether you guys did the work and they're just memorizing the lines that you gave them. And I'm not assuming that you guys did that. I'm assuming that they did it the other way around, but I have to be able to know that. So that's answering questions. And I do want to talk about the project updates, because we already have project updates. We're not even a month in. We have 2 for this year so far, and please keep an eye on this, because we may get new ones, especially as people start having their qualifying rounds. Sometimes we get new project updates based on what happens at those. So the first update is to solve your space problem first. So in the past, typically we have something in the problem statement about adding value to society, right? When we did the animal allies, it was all about making things better for both plants and people. We had to think about the societal impacts of what it was we're doing. You can still do that in this if the problem that you want to solve is a psychological or a social problem. Then there may very well be that adds value to society component to it. But there doesn't have to be. If your solution is a little more technical or addressing some sort of physical issue, that value to society is not necessarily required. So please don't let your kids hurt themselves trying to find that, because they don't have to. And then finding help, and they emphasized it, and it's kind of what I talked about before. Think about experts in all aspects of your problem. Don't just look for that space expert. Don't spend 2 months trying to get a hold of somebody from NASA just so that you can say you talked to somebody from NASA. That's cool. We want to talk to people from NASA. Frankly, everybody I've ever talked to from NASA is super fun to talk to. They're all really super passionate about what they do, and it's always a pleasure to work with them. But if your issue is something that has aspects, that it's a problem that's already been solved for Earth, well, who works with that problem here on Earth? Talk to the botanist about hydroponics, talk to that farmer, talk to, the HVAC expert if you're doing something about air filtration. If you're doing fuel cells, find somebody who works at a nuclear power plant or who works at a solar company. Use the experts on how that problem's been solved on Earth to give your kids a good grounding in their problem so that they can find an innovative solution. And there is a list in the back of the project section But I would really encourage you guys to think about who else you can talk to. And then make sure that you share with those same people so that they have the opportunity to talk about what you came up with and what are the questions that they have, because that's really valuable. I think. Oh, okay. And then this is my last slide. So I want to talk about moving on from a qualifying round to either state or to even beyond that. Part of the reason I really like the idea of having a dress rehearsal tournament is because that's sort of how project judges, and I think a lot of our judges, view even the qualifying round, right? It's still a competition. The kids are still being judged. It's a real thing. But everything that they do there and all the feedback that they get there needs to carry through to their next and their next tournaments. We had a group after the Springdale qualifier last year who had an absolutely incredible project, but they didn't quite hit the mark on showing us how it fit into the problem statement from first. And we had a conversation about it, and they came back at state, and they had made changes to their presentation, and it was perfect. It was exactly what they needed. It was exactly the change that they needed to make to move on and for their kids to be successful in presenting their work. And that's what we want to see. That's why we have all those sections on the rubric to give you guys feedback, is because we're trying to help your kids be better, to be successful. If we had our way, every team that we have would go on to Invitational or to Worlds, right? But we know we can't do that, so we have to do judging. But the point is that we want to validate what the kids have done, because these kids work really hard, and we know that, and we're really proud of them for it. But we also want to show them that there's ways that they can be better. Okay? So really use that feedback. And if you have used feedback, tell us. If you come to state and you're like, I was at Springdale qualifier and the judges told us this thing and this is how we changed our presentation, because we recognize that that's okay, because again, that's part of that process. So that's kind of what I have. Do you guys have any questions, or are there specific areas about the project? If there's anything from the packet that you have questions about, I can talk about that too.
So, you were talking about not every kid having to speak. Is that? I'll ask this question. Like in the Q&A too, if you see 4 kids out of 5 kids out of 10 kind of dominating that conversation, that doesn't reflect. I don't want that to reflect on only 5 kids did the work, or same thing in the presentation. I don't want it to reflect as those kids are the only ones that did the work. But you're saying judges interpret it more as those are just the kids that are more. In a lot of times, yeah, and partly it depends on how the Q&A goes, because if we end up having one kid talking about one thing for the whole time, because that's what we need more information about, and there's just not time for everybody to talk, it happens. We don't like that it happens, but it happens. It's kind of about how the kids talk about things. If it's clear to us in their answers that, yeah, these kids were part of it and they're just not super comfortable talking. If the person answering the question says, this was our team that worked on understanding hydroponics, and here's the people that we talked to, and this person did something, and this person did something. It's absolutely super fabulous to communicate that. Show us how they were part of the team. Talking in Q&A is not the be-all and end-all of doing that, right? Because you even for kids who are not comfortable and maybe need a little bit more rote memorization, they may not get asked the question that they can answer. So it may not do them any good to psych themselves up and try to memorize something that they can be comfortable presenting, because we may ask the wrong question to get to that, right? And one of the last things that we do, and I encourage my judges to do that when I'm their advisor, is there anything else that you want to share with us? Well, that can be the opportunity then. And if that kid really wants to try to say something and wants to be able to put themselves out there that way, that's going to be their opportunity to do that. And we'll continue to encourage our judges to ask that question so that they have that opportunity. But no, it's as long as we can see that the whole team was involved. If somebody doesn't answer a question, that's not automatically going to ding you down. No. Thank you. Any other questions? I think I talked one.
Sorry.
Oh yeah, no, you're good.
So in the past, I feel like it's been really confusing what the time limit really is, because sometimes we're communicated it's 5 minutes including setup, and then we get there and it almost always is, well, you've got a minute to set up, and like that's a pretty giant, like, because then we can really go
Yeah, it's
5.5 minutes
4 minutes,
for our
yeah.
presentation. So is there any consistency on that of how that's going to be?
The way that we have done it and the way that I believe we're going to continue to do it is it's 5 minutes including setup. So if it takes them 30 seconds to set up, then yeah, their skit better be 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Because we basically start the timer for the room as soon as the door opens and they start coming in. And we're supposed to, at 5 minutes, chop that off and then start doing the Q&A. Now, the truth is that if you guys are almost done and we can tell you're almost done, we'll sort of decide, because we want to see the whole presentation. And that will be something that we'll put in your comments. You went over time, make sure you clean that up. Because once you get to, if you get to Invitational or you get to Worlds, that 5 minute mark does become a bigger wall. Yes?
To kind of expand on that just a little bit, one of the things I noticed that my team gets confused with is kind of, I tell them, look, when you go into the room, you're starting, but they never really sense that. Should they just assume, like, should I just drill that into them?
Yeah.
Look, when that door opens, you are on the clock.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, as soon as that, we are watching them from the moment the first person sets foot in the room. And we do, I'm not gonna lie, I've made decisions about teams from their setup. Not fully, but it's certainly come into the consideration. If we walk in and the first thing I see is them arguing about whose job it is to set up the stage set, woo buddy. So that is absolutely something that we consider as soon as that door opens. And same thing with coaches. That's, it says in here, coaches can't help, parents can't help. Y'all are absolutely, we love having you in the room. We know it's important for you guys to be in the room. But if you come in and you're carrying something and you hand it to a kid and then they use that to set up for their project, that's a no-no. Now, small teams, they have lots of stuff. They need a hand carrying stuff. It's
last
not.
year, you said parents and stuff could carry stuff in.
It depends on what it is.
Okay.
And part of that does come from team size. We had a team last year that was 3 kids, and they had some big thing that.
Okay.
Well, they literally couldn't carry it, right?
Yeah.
But that is something we look for. If you walk in and you set something down and you start fiddling with it, that's absolutely a no-no. Don't do that. If you're just carrying it in and you set it down, well, we would prefer that not happen. And if you've got 10 kids and 3 of them walk in and they're not carrying something, they should have been carrying that box that you have in your hand. But it's a little bit tough sometimes, and I know that, and we know that. We do try to pay attention to what's actually humanly possible. But yeah, as soon as they walk in that door, as soon as that door opens, we're all on the clock.
With the bickering, what if 3/4 of the team are siblings?
That's
my team this
then you
year.
better tell us that so that we know. Well, it's my sister and I. I'm not even going to tell you. It was just bad. But we both performed. We both did violin. I did violin. She did cello. And we both performed. And when we were on stage, you didn't know. You could tell we were sisters because we're sisters and we kind of look like each other. But it's all about knowing when it's appropriate to do that and when it's not. Some of the best teams that I've ever seen have been brother-sister teams or family group teams that maybe have a couple of friends. And then we know that brothers and sisters can work together. We know that it's possible. Now, if we see that sort of bickering a little bit when we're doing pit visits, yeah, that's unscripted. Okay, fine. But when they're in the project room, if they can't manage that for 10 minutes, then that's a problem. Yes?
I have a question too. At Cersei, they don't really want anyone else in the rooms, but at State, they seem to allow, there's some question as to how many they allow in, I suppose. But I guess I have some question even about the setup. We were in some rooms where spectators were actually seated behind the presentation, and I just wonder if there's any reasoning for that, why, or why the chairs aren't in a different location. I just felt very awkward for my parents to be in there looking
behind
the kids, and I felt that was even unfair for the kids, because if a parent moves, or heaven forbid, their phone, I just wondered why the justification for that.
Well,
I'll take that.
huh,
I'll
okay.
take that.
Yep.
So we're trying to tighten that up, and we tried last year to tighten it up, and we did pretty good, but we're trying to get to the point where qualifiers are one adult in the room, period, one coach, period. Just because there's a lot more variability in exactly what you described. And so our goal for this year will be for all qualifiers to be one coach in the room, period. And then at the state championship, we'll allow more, because I have more control over those rooms and how they appear.
Well, that's how it is for us. Right. But it was at the state level is where I had the question about why parents were seated.
So unless the chairs got moved, they started the day either on the side or in the back.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then we do that intentionally, because if you're sitting behind the judges, for instance, or even off, in this corner, sort of off behind the judges, we can't necessarily see whether you're cueing your kids. And again, we don't assume that people are going to do things wrong, but we want to make sure that there's not opportunity for that. Because if we have our person who's forgotten their lines, if the coach is back here going, "Your line is this," that's not okay. That's gonna come against the team, even though you're just doing it because you're trying to help your kid. So we put them in the back so that opportunity isn't there. The kids have to do it themselves. They have to work together as a team and take care of it on their own, and that helps us do that. And we know sometimes people want to take pictures, and it's hard to take pictures from the back. So we do video sometimes, and we do answer that need if it's there. But by the time we get to state, you guys have already had opportunities to video your kids and to give them feedback and that kind of thing, either a qualifier or in your own presentations. So we have to be consistent with everybody so that we're treating everybody the same.